At a quiet picnic point, a millionaire CEO bent down on his knees to put sneakers on a barefoot little girl. What happened next will touch your heart forever. Stay till the end. The school bus screeched gently as it stopped near the wide picnic area. The door swung open, and instantly, children's laughter poured out like music, filling the morning air. The sky was painted a brilliant shade of blue, the sun glowing warmly over the green fields. The smell of fresh pine trees drifted with the cool breeze, carrying a sense of freedom and joy. One by one, little feet stepped down from the bus, each pair of sneakers bouncing with energy. Boys shouted as they spotted the swings in the distance. Girls giggled as they tugged each other's arms, eager to race toward the playground. Teachers called out reminders, their voices floating above the happy noise. Stay together. Don't run too far. But in the middle of this lively crowd was one small figure who didn't move with the same excitement. Her name was Rebecca. Rebecca's golden hair shone under the sunlight, neatly tied in two braids that fell over her shoulders. Her dress was simple but clean, carefully ironed for the trip. From a distance, she looked like every other happy child. But a closer look revealed a heartbreaking truth. Rebecca's feet were bare. The rough gravel of the path pressed into her soft skin with every step. Tiny cuts had already formed from walking without protection, and her toes curled painfully as she tried to walk slower, hoping no one would notice. Her sneakers, the only pair she had torn weeks ago. She had begged her stepmother for new ones, whispering timidly that she needed them for school. But her stepmother had only laughed coldly. "Shoes? You're lucky you even have food. Don't waste money on nonsense," she had snapped, slamming the kitchen door. So today, Rebecca had no choice but to climb onto the bus barefoot. She had tried to tuck her feet under the seat, praying no one would see. But as the bus rolled to a stop and children poured out, hiding became impossible. Rebecca stepped carefully, trying to walk as if nothing hurt, but each small stone stabbed her skin like a needle. The more she tried to be brave, the slower she walked. Her eyes darted around nervously, hoping no one would point at her. "But children notice everything," a boy whispered to his friend, covering his mouth with a mischievous grin. "She doesn't have shoes!" Another girl laughed, her voice sharp and cruel. "Look at her feet, they're dirty!" More giggles followed, little fingers pointed. The sound of laughter spread like wildfire. Rebecca's face flushed red. She wanted to vanish, to sink into the ground so no one would see her. Her hands gripped the sides of her dress tightly, and her lips pressed together to keep the tears from falling. She bit down so hard it almost hurt, telling herself over and over, "Don't cry, don't cry, don't let them see." The teachers, too busy guiding the larger group, didn't notice. The other parents weren't there, only chaperones and staff. So Rebecca stood alone, surrounded by giggles, her heart sinking deeper with every laugh. The joyful sound of the picnic turned into a cruel reminder for her. She didn't belong. Her little feet, red and scratched, carried her slowly toward the grassy field where the children were gathering. She tried to move quietly, hoping the laughter would stop if she blended in. But each painful step made her flinch, and every flinch made the whispers grow louder. Still, Rebecca stayed silent. She didn't shout back, didn't beg them to stop, didn't run away. She carried the pain on her tiny shoulders like she always had at home. She thought to herself, "It's okay. If I don't say anything, maybe they'll forget about me." But deep inside, her heart cried for something she had never truly known: kindness. Little did she know that this picnic, this ordinary Saturday morning, was about to change her life forever. And somewhere nearby, a pair of watchful eyes had already noticed her pain. On the far edge of the park, where the tall pine trees stood like guardians and the grass swayed with the morning breeze, a man sat quietly on a wooden bench. His presence was calm, almost invisible, though he carried an aura that made people instinctively glance at him twice. This was Grant Williams, a billionaire CEO whose name often echoed in boardrooms, whispered in business circles, and carved in magazines. At 37, he had built an empire from dust, a man known for power, success, and brilliance. Yet here, away from the marble floors of his office and the blinding lights of wealth, he was just a man seeking silence. Grant leaned back on the bench, his polished shoes resting on the gravel path. His sharp blue eyes scanned the open space, but they weren't looking for profit charts or deals today. They searched for something he couldn't define, peace maybe, or the warmth of human connection he had lost long ago. Despite his empire, despite the numbers in his bank, his life felt like a giant, cold mansion, empty and echoing. No child's laughter ran through his halls, no soft voice greeted him in the morning, no small hands clung to his fingers. Success had filled his pockets but left his heart hollow. That was why he often came here, to this park. The sound of children laughing gave him a strange comfort, even if it wasn't directed at him. Watching them play reminded him of something he never had. But that morning, something unusual caught his attention. Among the crowd of schoolchildren, a single girl stood out, not because of brightness, but because of her stillness. While others ran like the wind toward the swings, this little girl walked carefully, almost painfully. Her golden braids bounced lightly with each step, but her face was not painted with joy. Instead, her lips pressed together, holding back a storm of feelings she dared not release. Grant's gaze sharpened. He noticed her small feet, bare against the sharp stones of the path. The skin was scratched, bruised, even bleeding in spots. Every few steps, she winced, her tiny shoulders stiffening as though she was battling the pain inside. Something inside Grant stirred, a memory of his own childhood. Lonely, disciplined, stripped of comfort, flashed in his mind. He had never been barefoot, but he knew the pain of walking alone. The other children began to laugh. Their voices, playful a moment ago, turned mocking. Fingers pointed, smirks spread. Grant saw it all, the way the girl lowered her gaze, the way her small hands clenched her dress, the way her body shrank as if to disappear. Her silence cut deeper than any cry could. Grant's chest tightened. He had ignored many things in life, partnership offers, scandals, competitors begging for mercy. But this he could not ignore. The image of her bruised feet burned in his mind. It wasn't just the physical pain, it was the weight of humiliation, the sting of being singled out, the cruel injustice of childhood laughter. He leaned forward on the bench, his fingers curling into fists. For the first time in years, business deals, profits, and power meant nothing. He wasn't thinking like a CEO. He wasn't thinking like a billionaire. He was thinking like a man with a heart he thought had long turned cold, suddenly beating fast again. The little girl, Rebecca, though he didn't yet know her name, struggled to keep pace with the group. She stumbled once, her foot catching on a sharp stone, and Grant's breath caught. His instinct screamed at him to rise, to go to her, to stop the cruel scene unfolding before his eyes. Yet he stayed seated for a moment longer, watching, his heart pounding. The world around him blurred, the laughter, the rustling trees, the chatter of teachers, all of it faded until only the little girl's struggle filled his vision. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. For years he had been a man of numbers, of decisions, of logic. But now, as his eyes locked on her small frame and trembling steps, he felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper, an unshakable pull, a responsibility, a need to protect. He whispered under his breath, almost to himself, "No child should ever walk in pain." Grant Williams, the billionaire CEO known for conquering markets, had just found something far more important to conquer: the loneliness and suffering of a little girl whose life was about to intertwine with his in ways neither of them could have imagined. And though Rebecca didn't yet know, her quiet suffering had already reached the heart of a man who could change her world forever. The teachers' voices rang across the park. "Children, gather near the picnic tables. Line up, please." The laughter and noise slowly turned into chatter as the children began to move in a playful crowd toward the wooden tables under the shade of the tall oak trees. Bags were dropped, Snacks opened, and the sound of excitement filled the space like a happy symphony. But not everyone moved with ease. At the back of the group, Rebecca tried to follow, her little feet pressed against the stones and dry twigs scattered across the path. Each step was sharper than the last, stabbing her skin like glass. Her breath hitched as the pain grew heavier, but she forced herself to keep going. She didn't want to be left behind. She didn't want to look weaker than she already did. Then it happened. Her right heel struck a jagged rock. The skin tore and a sharp sting of pain shot up her leg. Rebecca gasped, stumbling forward. She tried to steady herself, but the pain was too much. She wobbled and finally dropped to her knees on the grass, her tiny hands clinging to the ground. For a moment there was silence. Then came the laughter. "She's barefoot!" a boy sneered, his voice louder than it needed to be. "Look at her feet! They're bleeding!" another child added with a cruel giggle. The laughter spread again like fire, careless and cruel. Children whispered behind cupped hands, some pointing, others pretending to mimic her limp. Rebecca's face flushed crimson. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. Her tiny chest rose and fell as she tried to keep her breathing steady. She whispered, shaky but determined, I'm okay. She pulled her legs close, tucking them under her dress, hiding her wounded feet from the world. The hem of her dress grew damp with blood, but she didn't care. She just wanted to disappear, to melt into the ground where no one could see her pain. The laughter of children, which should have been a melody of joy, now felt like daggers piercing her heart. But someone else was watching. From his bench, Grant Williams had seen every step, every stumble, every tear she tried so hard to hide. He had seen her courage, her silence, and now, her breaking point. And something inside him snapped. He rose from the bench, slowly, but with purpose. His tall frame straightened, his sharp eyes fixed only on her. The sound of his polished shoes crunching against the gravel echoed in the air, louder than the laughter. Each step he took seemed to hush the world around him. The children's giggles faltered. Teachers turned their heads. Even the birds seemed to pause in the trees above, as though the air itself sensed something was about to change. Rebecca lifted her head in surprise. Through her teary vision, she saw a man walking toward her. His presence was commanding yet calm, powerful yet gentle. She didn't know who he was, but something about him made her heart stop racing for just a moment. Grant's gaze softened as he came closer. He had faced ruthless businessmen, impossible deals, and storms of betrayal, but never had his heart pounded like this. Never for something as simple as a little girl sitting on the grass, hiding her wounds. The teachers exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. The children fell into uneasy silence. All eyes followed the man, whose very steps carried an energy no one could ignore. Rebecca, still trembling, whispered again, but this time her words weren't just for herself. They were almost a plea, soft and broken. I'm okay, really. But Grant knew the truth. She wasn't okay, and he wasn't going to let her suffer another moment. The world that had laughed at her just seconds ago was about to witness something it would never forget. Grant stopped directly in front of Rebecca. His shadow stretched over her small frame as she sat curled on the grass. For a moment, the world seemed frozen. The breeze paused, the laughter stilled. Even the leaves above stopped rustling. Rebecca's heart thudded in her chest. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. His tall figure, polished suit, and serious expression made him look like someone important, someone untouchable. She thought she was about to be scolded for slowing down the group, for sitting on the ground instead of joining the others. Her tiny voice trembled. I'm sorry. But Grant didn't scold her. Instead, something no one expected happened. He bent down slowly, lowering himself until one knee pressed into the grass. The mighty billionaire, who had once made thousands of people rise in respect when he entered a room, was now lowering himself to the level of a 7-year-old girl. His eyes, sharp as steel in business, now softened with something unfamiliar. Gentleness. Sweetheart, he spoke, his voice quiet yet warm. "Why are you walking barefoot? Where are your shoes?" Rebecca's lips quivered. For a moment she thought of lying, of making up some excuse to protect her pride. But the kindness in his tone broke the wall she had built around herself. They broke," she whispered, ashamed, staring at the ground. "And I don't have new ones." Her small hands quickly covered her feet, as if hiding the wounds would make the laughter vanish. Tears pricked at her eyes again. She wanted to disappear, but instead, this man was looking directly at her, really seeing her, when everyone else had only laughed. Grant's heart ached. He had built skyscrapers, earned billions, but right now nothing mattered except this little girl's trembling voice. Without saying another word, he stood. His tall frame straightened, and for a brief second, the children and teachers thought he might walk away. But instead, he moved with purpose toward the parking lot, where his sleek black car waited in the sun. Whispers spread through the crowd. "Who is he? Why's he going to his car? Is he mad?" Rebecca sat frozen, confused, her heart racing. Did she upset him? Did she make him leave? But just minutes later, Grant returned. In his hands was a box. The sunlight gleamed against the polished cardboard as though it carried something precious. He came back to Rebecca and, without hesitation, sat down on the grass right beside her. The billionaire CEO, known for commanding boardrooms, silencing critics, and sealing billion-dollar deals, now sat cross-legged in the dirt, his suit brushing against the grass as though he cared nothing about it. The crowd held its breath. Grant opened the box. Inside lay a pair of brand-new, shining white sneakers. They looked almost angelic against the dull green of the park, spotless and beautiful. Rebecca's eyes widened. She blinked as if she couldn't trust what she was seeing. Grant gently reached for her foot. At first, Rebecca pulled back, shy and scared, but his eyes reassured her. Slowly, she let him take her small, wounded heel into his hands. Gasps rippled through the teachers and children. Was this real? The man who looked like he belonged in a mansion was now on his knees, gently cleaning dirt and blood from a child's foot with his silk handkerchief. His movements were slow, careful, almost reverent, as if her pain mattered more than anything in the world. When the wound was clean, he lifted the sneaker from the box. He slid it over her foot, tying the laces with practiced care. Then he did the same with the other, his large hands moving with a gentleness that shocked everyone watching. Rebecca's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. The weight of kindness, something she had rarely felt, was too heavy. She stared at him, blinking rapidly, her heart whispering words her lips could not. "Why? Why would someone like you care about someone like me?" And in that moment, she realized something. He wasn't just giving her shoes. He was giving her dignity. He was giving her the right to stand tall among the other children without shame. The billionaire CEO, feared in business halls, was kneeling in the grass, giving a child back her pride. And Rebecca would never forget it. The laughter that had once echoed through the playground faded into a heavy silence. Even the wind seemed to pause, carrying the weight of the moment. The children who had mocked Rebecca moments earlier shifted uncomfortably. Their smiles vanished, replaced by guilt that pressed on their young hearts. They watched, ashamed, as the most powerful man they had ever seen knelt humbly before the smallest girl among them. Grant finished tying the laces, his large hands moving with surprising gentleness. When he finally looked up, his eyes softened, melting away the coldness of a man who once lived only for work and success. "Now, princess," he said with a tender smile, "you can run without pain. No one will ever laugh at you again." Rebecca's lips trembled. Her big brown eyes brimmed with tears, not the bitter kind she had carried all her life, but tears born from kindness she had never known. Before he could move, she threw her tiny arms around his neck. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. Grant froze, stunned by the sudden embrace. For a man who had spent years building walls around his heart, Her touch pierced through every layer of loneliness. Slowly, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. The playground stood still. Teachers wiped their eyes. Some children lowered their heads, wishing they could take back their cruel laughter. In that quiet embrace, the CEO who ruled empires and the barefoot girl who had nothing found something greater than wealth or power, an unspoken bond of love and humanity. Grant's chest tightened, but not with pain, with warmth. For the first time in years, his heart felt alive. The afternoon sun had started to sink lower, painting the picnic grounds in shades of gold. Children chased each other through the grass, their giggles echoing like little bells in the wind. But this time, Rebecca's laughter rose above them all. She wasn't standing on the sidelines anymore. She wasn't hiding her feet. She was running, truly running for the first time without fear of pain or shame. Her new sneakers, bright and shining, carried her forward like wings. Each step was light, each jump filled with joy. The same children who had laughed at her earlier now ran beside her, no longer mocking her but cheering her on. Some even smiled with a touch of guilt in their eyes, as if silently apologizing for their cruelty. Rebecca didn't hold a grudge. She simply laughed with them, her innocence too pure to dwell on hurt. Grant sat quietly on the picnic bench, his expensive suit jacket folded neatly beside him. But for once, he didn't care about appearances, meetings, or power. His eyes never left Rebecca. He watched the way her little arms spread out like a bird, how her braids bounced as she jumped over the grass, how her cheeks glowed with the freedom of being accepted. Something inside him shifted, something deeper than he had ever known. Boardrooms had given him victories, money had given him status, but none of it had ever filled the empty space in his heart. Yet here, watching a barefoot girl now running with pride because of a simple gift, that emptiness melted away. When the sun began to fade and families started gathering their things, Rebecca ran back. Her tiny hand reached for his as if she had known him her whole life. Her fingers, small but strong, wrapped around his larger hand. She looked up at him with eyes shimmering like morning dew. "Thank you. You're my hero," she whispered, her voice trembling with raw sincerity. The words pierced Grant's heart like light cutting through darkness. He had been called many things in life: CEO, millionaire, powerhouse, but never hero. That one word, spoken by a little girl who had once been invisible to everyone else, meant more to him than every deal he had ever signed. Grant's lips curved into a rare smile. Not the polite, practiced smile he wore for investors or the stiff smiles for cameras. This one was different, real, tender, filled with warmth. He bent down to her level and brushed her hair gently behind her ear. "You gave me more than I gave you, Princess," he said softly. Rebecca didn't understand fully, but she felt the love in his words. She threw her arms around him again, squeezing as if she didn't want to let go. Grant hugged her back tightly, closing his eyes for a brief moment. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Around them, parents and children had stopped to watch. They weren't seeing a millionaire anymore. They weren't seeing a poor girl in need. They were witnessing something purer, a bond that had been created by compassion. Whispers spread quietly among the crowd. One mother leaned to another and said, "All it took was a pair of sneakers. Look how happy she is." Another father murmured, "Money doesn't always mean power. Sometimes kindness is the greatest wealth." And so the lesson was planted in every heart present that day. Grant walked Rebecca back to her guardian, but even as they parted, she refused to let go of his hand until the very last moment. When she finally did, she looked back at him with a smile so bright it could melt the coldest of hearts. Her steps were confident now, not hesitant. She walked with her chin up, her sneakers gleaming as a symbol of dignity. Grant watched her go, his chest heavy but full. He knew that the memory of this moment would stay with him forever, No amount of money, no luxury car, no mansion could compare to the sound of that girl's laughter and the warmth of her gratitude. And so the truth became clear, not only to him, but to everyone who had witnessed it. True wealth is not measured in numbers, but in kindness. True success is not found in buildings or titles, but in hearts touched and lives changed. And in a society that too often judged by appearances, mocking the poor, ignoring the weak, Grant had shown that compassion could silence cruelty and love could rewrite a child's story. Rebecca walked forward with her sneakers, but more than that, she carried something greater, the courage to believe she was not alone anymore. And Grant? He walked away knowing that for once in his life he had not just made money, he had made a difference. That day, one barefoot girl and one lonely millionaire taught an entire community what it truly meant to be human.